Welcome to the Halloween-a-thon 2022, where I'm going to discuss 31 movies that I watched throughout the month of October that I had never seen before and that are in the spirit of Halloween. I'm going to give you my general thoughts on each movie, so let's begin. Number 1, Videodrome. This movie had some great special effects. It was really creepy and worthy of its cult following. I will admit, though, that I did find it a little confusing. Number 2, GINGERDEAD Man. This movie was super low budget. I was disappointed at how little Gary Busey was in the film, and his voice role as a Gingerdead Man wasn't nearly as funny as I'd hoped it would be. Most of the actors couldn't act their way out of a paper bag, and the character Butcher Baker was trying way too hard to be like Ash Williams. I think the best part of the movie is the "Got Milk" line. Number 3, Hider in the House. I was pleasantly surprised at how good this movie was. Gary Busey was awesome in this, and it was a great pick to follow up his lackluster performance in Gingerdead Man. The movie is very suspenseful and based in realism, which makes it all the more creepy. Number 4, Ice Cream Man. I enjoyed the cinematography of this film, as well as the special effects and overall concept. I was a little disappointed that the Ice Cream Man character wasn't magical. I was hoping he'd have some sort of magical powers or something, but overall it was still an entertaining film. Number 5, Sorority House Massacre. The acting wasn't terrible, the visuals weren't too bad, even the premise was alright, but overall, this movie stunk. Number 6, Smile. The concept reminded me of the movie It Follows. It was entertaining, but overall, it was still pretty predictable. Number 7, Rockula. This movie has a very 80s soundtrack, spanning across a wide range of musical genres. If you like cheesy 80s music, then you'll probably enjoy this movie. It's a nice, chill, relaxing film that's fun for the whole family. Number 8, Jeepers Creepers Reborn. Oh boy, where to even begin with this pile of garbage? If you know anything about Jeepers Creepers, then you know that the premise is that the monster comes out every 23 years to hunt. This movie came out 21 years after the first one, and they wasted a golden sequel opportunity on a reboot. It also had some weird CGI backgrounds, which could have been due to COVID-related filming, except for the CGI scenes were mostly in the woods, which would have been the safest place to film during COVID than in an enclosed green screen room. The Creeper's new design looked terrible, but they did give him a Laszlo Ravencroft-style hat. Hopefully it's just as cursed as Laszlo's and will make this Creeper disappear forever. Number 9, Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. This film did a great job at making me feel uncomfortable with the characters from the very start, but the best part was, I couldn't always put my finger on why certain characters made me feel uncomfortable. The movie is a whodunit, but with an interesting twist. I highly enjoyed the film and would recommend it to those who are fans of mysteries. Number 10, Hocus Pocus 2. I was pleasantly surprised at how much I enjoyed this movie. It wasn't quite as good as the original, and that's the only reason I gave it a 7 out of 10 and not an 8 out of 10 like I did the original movie. But man, it was still great. There were plenty of laugh-out-loud moments, throwbacks to the original that didn't feel forced, and awesome visual effects. My only real complaint was that the ending felt a bit out of place, almost like they couldn't figure out how to end it and just made something up real quick. Number 11, HELLRAISER. A remake to the original Hellraiser, this movie does a fantastic job at rebooting the franchise. I've admittedly only seen the first 2 of the original Hellraiser movies, but I'm told there are some new elements to how the puzzle box works that may or may not disappoint fans. I still found this movie to be very creepy, with plenty of gore, suspense, and other amazing sights to see. Number 12, Cursed Friends. It felt like the jokes in this movie leaned a little more towards a female audience, but it still had some really funny moments, and overall the movie was very entertaining. The concept was great, but I'm not sure if I'd personally consider this movie horror. IMDb says it's horror, so we're still gonna count it. Number 13, Werewolf by Night. This special had the feel of a classic Universal monster movie from the 30s, mixed with some modern-day filmmaking. I thought it did a great job as a standalone short, but I really do hope to see more of these characters in the future. I was a little surprised with how graphic it was. I'm assuming they were able to get by with more blood and violence since this special is mostly in black and white. Some people might say that this shouldn't count for the marathon since it's technically a special and not a movie, but I wanted to add it to the list anyway since I really enjoyed it. Number 14, Teenage Space Vampires. Some of the voices in this film seemed obviously dubbed and it was a little off-putting. The movie has like one song and they use it a lot. All you really need to know about this movie is that it sucks. Skip it. Number 15, Street Trash. This movie was dark, disturbing, and disgusting. And I loved it. The whole movie is so bizarre, you'll be asking yourself, did I really just see that? There was a keep away scene between the hobos that had me laughing so hard. If you've seen the movie, then you know exactly which scene I'm talking about. My only complaint is that I wish the movie had focused more on the melting people plot that they established early on, because it sort of drops that for a good chunk of the film. Number 16, Pumpkinhead. The monster effects in this movie were really well done. They did an interesting strobe light effect in the background whenever the monster was around, which I thought was a clever way to simply show that he was surrounded by an evil aura. I enjoyed the premise of this film, but it felt like it was missing something to make it go from being good to being great. Number 17, Chuck Steele, Night of the Trampires. This movie was dark, disturbing, and disgusting, and also revolved around hobos. Whoa, I'm getting some deja vu. The movie is almost entirely stop-motion animation and takes heavy inspiration from 80s action and horror films. The animation in this film is incredible. It was a beautifully shot movie full of colorful detail and lots of gore. The Trampire transformation scenes and deaths were wildly entertaining. My only complaint would be that some of the awesome effect scenes weren't on the screen long enough. They sort of rushed through them. Number 18, Hatchet. Joel David Moore stars in this film, and it's almost impossible for me to see him and not think of his character JP from the movie Grandma's Boy. The movie, and the whole franchise, pays tribute to the 80s slasher genre. The kills are insanely violent. I imagine they were thinking, how could we top Jason Voorhees in terms of violent murders? Speaking of which, the main antagonist, Victor Crowley, has a lot of similarities to Jason, including that he's portrayed by Kane Hodder, who played Jason in 4 of the Friday the 13th films. This movie also includes small roles from horror veterans Tony Todd and Robert Englund. Number 19, Hatchet 2. I really enjoy how this movie picks up right where the last movie left off, although the returning character is recast to actress Danielle Harris, who's best known as Jamie in the Halloween franchise. Kane Hodder returns, as well as Tony Todd, who has a much larger role in this film. There's also small roles and cameos from even more horror veterans such as Tom Holland, Arhe Mieloff, and Lloyd Kaufman. I loved that there is a Leslie Vernon reference in this movie, as Behind the Mask is another great movie that pays tribute to the slasher series. This movie has to hold the record for world's largest chainsaw used to murder somebody. Number 20, Hatchet 3. This one has appearances by Carolyn Williams, Sid Haig, and Zach Galligan. The creator of the Hatchet series, Adam Green, has cameos in each movie, and this one is his best cameo by far. Number 21, Victor Crowley. This is the last Hatchet movie as of 2022, and has horror veterans Tony Todd, Laura Ortiz, Felissa Rose. You get the point. This one starts slow and isn't quite as good as the first 3, but it's still worth watching. The intro scene is one of the best parts, even though Jonah Ray's character is wearing my shirt in this scene. Number 22, Halloween Ends. This movie wasn't terrible for a horror movie, but it was pretty lousy for a Halloween movie. It was way less intense than Halloween Kills, and the story was much weaker than the Halloween from 2018. Following the tradition of the Halloween movie timelines before it, this was a very weak ending to this Halloween's timeline. Number 23, The Lost Boys. This movie is pretty entertaining. I do feel like it is slightly dated, as the movie has a very 80s feel to it. The scene with the noodles and rice just made me think of the movie What We Do in the Shadows. Why don't you eat some biscuit? Number 24, The Craft. It was interesting to see Neve Campbell and Skeet Ulrich both in this movie, as they both also starred in the first Scream movie together, which also came out in 1996. Have you ever noticed how 1996 was such a great year for movies? Anyway, there's a scene where somebody's hit by a car, and I don't know why, but I really enjoyed how they filmed it. It's not gory, but it's effectively shocking and had some great camera work. Number 25, Night of the Comet. This was an entertaining post-apocalyptic movie about a comet that almost ends the world, but not in the way you'd think. They did this dream within a dream sequence in the movie, which is always a bogus move. Unless you're watching, like, Inception or something. Number 26, Dead End Drive-In. Another movie that IMDb and my producer both claim is horror that I personally didn't agree with. I would have labeled it sci-fi action drama. It's also a post-apocalyptic movie, but this one's about a drive-in turned containment camp. Oh, and it's Australian. Number 27, Tiny Cinema. This is an anthology movie, similar to Creepshow or The Twilight Zone, but modernized with off-key humor added to each story. Most of the stories are really strange and off the wall. I kept asking myself, what the hell am I even watching here? The credits did something that I thought was interesting though. Instead of white credits with a black background, they keyed in a lava lamp effect behind the text, which was a really neat visual effect. Number 28, 13 Fanboy. This movie is about a serial killer that hunts down former cast members of the Friday the 13th and Halloween movie franchises, and stars the real-life actors as themselves. I really enjoyed how this film displays on screen who each actor or actress is, what movies they were in, and their character's name in said movie. The killer looks pretty generic. I think that the movie would have been more enjoyable if the killer actually mimicked Jason Voorhees. Slow, stalking kills that were brutal. I feel like this would have been a better tribute to the franchise. Corey Feldman is among the celebrities to star in this movie, but despite the fact that he also starred in a Friday the 13th film, they decided to cast him as another character and not as himself. Since he's one of the most recognizable stars in the film, it definitely took away from the illusion of realism in the film's story. The killer claims that he grew up watching Friday the 13th and Halloween movies, and his kills are based on having vengeance for the stars of these franchises. Almost every single celebrity that's in this film was from a Friday the 13th movie, with the exception of one, Dee Wallace, who was in Rob Zombie's Halloween. I felt like the inclusion of the Halloween franchise being part of his killing spree was only part of the story as an excuse to cast Dee Wallace as one of the leading roles. They should have either dropped that he wanted vengeance on the Halloween cast, or added more cast members to the franchise. Hell, even say Dee Wallace was a friend of someone from the Friday the 13th cast that got too close to the killer, thus becoming a victim herself. The credits did something I've never seen before. They rolled, as usual, with a song playing in the background. Then once the song ended, silence. Credits rolled for over 2.5 minutes with no music at all. It just added to the idea that this movie was rushed. Number 29, Rawhead Rex. The practical effects for the monster were a little cheesy, but I really enjoyed how they looked. They gave him some really cool glowing eyes, and he's constantly drooling. It was a little weird that he's supposed to be 1,000 years old, yet he's wearing clothes and boots that look almost medieval. He looks like he came straight out of the band Gwar. The best part of the film, though, was a scene in the graveyard where Rex baptizes one of his followers, and let's just say it was highly unexpected. Number 30, Skinner. This film stars Ted Raimi and Ricky Lake, and is, as far as I know, Ted Raimi's only leading role in the movie. There's a scene that reminded me of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but somehow it was even more disturbing. If you've seen the movie, then you probably know what scene I'm talking about. Trust me, you'll have to see it to believe it. The story was all over the place. I really hoped I'd like this movie more, but in the end, it was just okay. Number 31, Bloody Muscle Bodybuilder in Hell. This movie has been coined as the Japanese Evil Dead, and for good reason. There are a lot of intentional similarities between the two films. The main character even says groovy at one point. The movie uses a wide range of practical and special effects, some of which are better than others. My guess is, like the original Evil Dead, they're experimenting with different techniques when they made the film. Number 32, Spirit Halloween, the movie. That's right, I watched more than 31 movies this month, so I figured, hey, why not throw a few more in? I thought this film would be a big marketing gimmick for Spirit Halloween, but honestly, this movie was really entertaining. I was worried that it would be too much of a kids movie, but it wasn't. The characters felt genuine and the plot was thought out. Everyone in the film seemed to make realistic choices and have authentic reactions, instead of just being cliché. The concept of the film is that a group of kids are trapped inside a Spirit Halloween store that's haunted by an evil ghost. The movie does a great job at riding the line between safe for kids and scary for adults. There's some good scares, but the film never gets too dark or gory. I also enjoyed that Christopher Lloyd had a role in this film, as it's always great seeing him on screen. My only real complaint is that I wish they had done more with the monsters in the store. It felt like it took a while to get to those scenes, and then it seemed like they went by fast once the store started to come to life. Number 33, Body Parts. This movie is centered around a man who receives an arm transplant, but things start to go terribly wrong soon after. A lot of the film is psychological horror, but there are still plenty of violent scenes, including a very intense car crash, as well as some scenes of mutilation. The acting in the film is phenomenal. Jeff Fahey does an amazing job at playing a character who's losing control as his life is slowly falling apart. Another actor that had some very dramatic acting scenes was Brad Dourif, who you probably know as the voice of Chucky. Number 34, The Hitcher. This movie was extremely suspenseful. The concept of a murderous hitchhiker was fairly realistic, although there were parts of the film that seemed a little far-fetched. I think my biggest complaint would be the decisions that the victim made, but that's mainly because I know I would have personally made different choices in dealing with a killer that was after me. Or at least I think I would have. This was the last movie in my marathon, and it was a great pick, as it was thoroughly entertaining. If you did a Halloween-a-thon of your own this year, or watched any new movies that you'd like to talk about, let us know in the comments below. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and most importantly, have a happy Halloween.